Matthew 5, 1 through 12. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
All right. Good morning again. Hey, did you guys watch the Eagles-Cowboys game last Sunday? I guess there was another Eagles game on Thursday night too. But did you notice in that Eagles-Cowboys game something really beautiful happened? I mean, it was like this, just this sweet, refreshing wind of fresh air that just kind of. Did you notice it? Like when one of the teams would call timeout, or there would be a change of possession, and it would go to commercial. And there was no political ads at all, right? Did you notice that? Like, you notice when it went to commercial, like your blood pressure all of a sudden, you just like get even a little bit higher, or like you felt a sudden urge to leave the room or go take a bath or something because of what you just listened to, right? The mailbox, that's what I'm looking for, wasn't stuffed with all those political ads, right? And so it's just this reminder that, oh, yes, right, it's this wonderful time where I can crawl back into my hole and not be so concerned about what is, the political powers are doing and all this sort of thing. All right, so that was great. Now, admittedly, it was kind of a swap out where we didn't get the political ads, but then, unfortunately, we got Christmas ads before Thanksgiving. So my blood pressure is still a little high, but that's a rant for another time. But the Eagles won, so, blood pressure came back down. Yeah, it's good. All right, so it's just a reminder that, we get a reprieve from all that. But I will say there is this brief window of time where I actually become quite interested. And it's in maybe 2 weeks after a major election, because I do like to listen to or read, a lot of people's commentary or their perspectives on, what just happened and why did what just happen? So you get interesting and actually some very wise reflection from people on both sides who are analyzing, how people went into the voting booth and what happened as a result. And for me, that's just very interesting. It's an interesting window into our culture and what drives and animates our culture, right? So you hear of some of the values or the priorities that people took into the voting booth. Or we could say another way, you hear in the way people analyze how people voted, you hear what as a culture we think is the pathway to the good life, or the rich and blessed life, if we could say it that way. Which is always striking, or at least it was striking for me, especially this time as we're spending 3 weeks here in the Beatitudes, right? Because when you hear of what values and priorities people are taking into the voting booth, it's not, these 9 things that Jesus identifies. Well, actually, this is what the life that is blessed looks like. So it reminds us what we've said a couple times, that in this intro to the Sermon on the Mount, we're being clued in right from the beginning that this kingdom, as I learned our women's Bible study would talk about the Sermon on the Mount, is like this upside down kingdom. Right? It doesn't fit nice with the kingdoms of the world like we talked about last week. It doesn't play nice. Like there's just this radical difference. And it comes out right away when Jesus pronounces what ways of life are actually richly blessed. The other thing that you will hear from commentators is what we all know already, but a lot of voices still saying it, is that we are a divided country. And not just divided, we've always been divided, but we are a bitterly divided country, right? You might know, like some relationships that got a little tense there, during that election season. Or, I don't know, you've been on social media and you saw, the vitriol that might have came out on the array of, those who voted this way or voted that way, blah, 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 blah. We were in our men's group yesterday, and one of our guys works in disaster relief and was telling us about how, there was this thing as Ida was coming through the hurricane and wreaking havoc. I cannot say my words today. Havoc in North Carolina, that FEMA workers were deliberately not going and offering aid to houses that had certain candidates' signs posted in their front yard, right? So there's this division that really gets bitter. And it's into that we hear this almost like this stark word that blessed are the peacemakers, right? Those who are going out and making peace, their life is a blessed life, a blessed way of life. And then here's what you want to remember too, just by way of intro or recap, right? It's not that as you do these things, you earn divine favor. Right? It's not as if, at work, if you live a certain way and you act a certain way, maybe your boss will see you and grant you that promotion to, a better. That's not what this is about. It's not like as you pursue these things, God will grant you that promotion and favor. No, it's saying, more matter of fact, that those who live in pursuit of peace, they are living the life that is blessed, or they are living the rich, good, and blessed life, because it is a life that syncs up with my kingdom that I am bringing into the present, right? So this really stark word, it would have been stark to the first century Galileans who were looking for a king to come and deliver them from oppression. Blessed are the peacemakers. And I think it's equally as stark and ripe with opportunity too, for the Church of Christ today in a bitterly divided culture. Blessed is the life of the peacemaker. That's the primary thing we're going to look at this morning. We'll talk on how it relates to blessed are those who are persecuted on Christ's account or for righteousness' sake. But we're going to spend most of our time talking about this, blessed are the peacemakers. And really what we're doing this morning, I feel almost like this bigger need to define what peacemaking is not. And maybe through that, get a clearer picture of what making peace is. All right? We'll try to get some practical stuff there at the end and try to talk about even why this life is a blessed life. All right? So that's sort of where we're going. But again, I'm going to be spending a lot of time here in the beginning just talking about what peacemaking is not. And maybe part of the reason for that, peace is kind of like a buzzword. You hear a lot about peace today, especially like as the next generations we're finding are increasingly anxious and fearful and worried, right? You sense this longing for peacefulness. But the thing is, like if you hear how we talk about peace, it's not really what Jesus has in mind here. Like we talk about peace as sort of like this inner calm or this inner serenity now or inner tranquility, right? We talk about peace as, okay, here's how you go about peace. You have to learn how to manage your health. You have to learn how to manage your finances. You have to learn how to manage your relationships so that you can minimize stress or that you can avoid stressors, right? It's almost this sense that like, hey, the world out there, chaotic, stress-inducing, broken. And so you got to learn how to manage, your health and finances and relationships as a way as almost to be able to have this inner calm and peace and that, or avoid those stressors altogether and to stay back from it. Not really what Jesus is talking about. That's almost like a idolatrous self-loving sort of approach to peace. And I highlight that because I have no problem confessing that if I idolize one thing more than another, it's probably peace. I am a peace lover through and through. And no problem saying that, yeah, many times that crosses a path into idolatry. And so the thing of that is, because I'm a lover of peace, well, I tend to live the life of a peacemaker. But not the kind of peacemaker that Jesus has in mind here. Like, for instance, I'll just go ahead and put myself on the block here a good bit this morning because this is something, because I love peace and I want it, and so obvious way, I've confessed it or mentioned it many times. If I'm going home and even before I get to the door, I realize I'm walking into a chaotic situation that is going to infringe upon my peace that I love so dearly. It's like as I'm walking to the door, I can hear the little kids. I can hear them screaming at each other and with angry voices from outside. And then I open the door and I walk in and I can hear the screaming all the more, and I can see them go running down, and one is trying to run away, and the other one is running with something sharp or heavy in his hand that he's looking to throw at the person because of what they did. I'm going in there with a very strong desire to be a peacemaker, right? But how am I going to make peace in that situation? I'm going to exercise my power and my dominance, and I'm going to get control of the situation. And I'm going to lay down the law and say, this is how this is going to be now. And I am going to give threats that if you don't adhere to my law and respect my power and authority in this position, well, then you will be banished from my kingdom, and you will go kill each other outside or in the quiet of your bedroom with the door closed and locked from the inside. Right? It's almost like I would be going at making peace the way maybe, in that first century context, Caesar would have. Right? The people that Jesus is talking to, they're living under the peace of Rome, the Pax Romana. Right? But it's a very different way of making peace. Right? It's a peace through empire building and through dominance and suppression and violence, and then we'll get peace. Right? Not what Jesus has in mind. Give you another false example. There was a phrase that for a brief period of time I was using. It was a nice 2-word phrase. I stopped using it because it was detrimental to my health. I'll tell you why in a second. But if you had asked me at the time, I thought it was a very noble phrase. If you had asked me, I probably would have said, well, this is a phrase of taking a high road and being a peacemaker. It was a nice 2-word phrase, simply, I'm out. Right? This is the other way that I deal with peace. Maybe I would be in a conversation with Amy, and let's say we were talking about something that we had, maybe a slight difference of perspective on. And, me, I like a good back and forth and arguing different perspectives and things. Amy, not so much, and she doesn't like that, well, I'm quick to argue a point or whatever. And so as maybe we're talking and her point isn't maybe being heard or coming across, and because she feels things very much more intensely than I do, you can feel emotions starting to kick in. Her voice is getting a little louder. The eyebrows are getting a little more furrowed, right? And because I am fearful of intense emotions, I see where this is going real fast. I say, whoa, I'm out. Let's talk about this when, we can calm it down and we're not so, right? And if Amy was upset that I was arguing against her position, or she's even more upset that now I would think her position so insignificant that I can just say, I'm out, and just walk away. And now she's noticing that there's a very sharp object right next to her. She could grab, and that's not true. Amy would never do that. But that's the other way that I can make peace. I can just escape it, avoid it. That's not the peace Jesus is talking about. Right? Jesus stands in heaven and looks on a broken, chaotic, evil-ridden, contrary creation. Right? He doesn't say, I'm out. Right? He leaves the glories of heaven, considers equality with God not something to be grasped, but he empties himself and takes on the form of a servant and becomes obedient, even unto the point of death, to enter into that broken creation. Right? Let me give you one more example, false way of doing it. Yeah, see, Amy's in the kids. I did get permission from Amy, and I'm noticing Kate's not here as well, too. So maybe I won't throw Megan under the bus. I'm not going to throw anybody on the bus. But let's say that also, when I'm at home and I realize, what would be really helpful for Amy is if I went and I asked the girls to clean up some of the dishes that they've left around, maybe downstairs or in the room or on the table, on the counter or whatever. But then I remember Kate, never Megan. I remember Kate, picking Kate up from home and realizing, wow, she's a little bit of a bad mood. Maybe school didn't go so well or she's tired. And I know that I really should say something because it would be helpful to Amy, so she doesn't have to do all this stuff. But it might just be more peaceful to let sleeping dogs lie and not go there and say, hey, Kate, can you pick up your stuff? Because I don't know what's going to come out, right? That's another way of making peace. Or maybe like a more poignant example of that, sad example of that would have been like Christian pastors in the South back in the age of civil rights. Right? These pastors who knew that segregation, discrimination was not right, was not just. But, to speak out, to point out sin, well, that's going to disturb the peace a little bit, and because we're going to be peacemakers here, and we're just going to let sleeping dogs lie, and so we won't call out things that we see are not quite right. Man, I said it before, and I'll say it as many times as you ask. I think every Christian at some point in their life should read Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham prison, and he's writing to church leaders. And he's writing fundamentally to answer the question that is coming from the church leaders in the South that are saying to him, hey, why all the boycotts? Why all the sit-ins? Why all the public demonstrations? Don't you just see how you're disrupting the public order? Why don't you just wait and let this new administration, let's see how things go, right? And Martin Luther King, as he's writing to them, he's saying, well, let me just read some of the stuff. It says, when you've seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, or when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to that public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and you see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children. And you see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky. And you see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness towards white people. Then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. But then here's the thing. He goes on to say, what he has come to find, regrettably so, that the greatest obstacle and the hindrance to justice and equality in the black community was not the Ku Klux Klan or is not the white citizens councilman, but it was the white moderate Christian. How does he say it? He says, the white moderate Christian who is more devoted to quote-unquote order than to justice. And listen to this, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Right? Who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal that you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct, even nonviolent action. Oh man, then this chilling line. All too many Christians, he says, have been more cautious than courageous and have remained silent behind the anesthetizing security of stained glass windows. And that phrase there has often haunted me because, again, I'm a peace lover. And I have said to you guys many times how deeply I love all that Grace Church is to me. Right? I love the worship, I love the fellowship, I love the accountability, the care, the prayers, right? Just being a part of this family, right? And so I can easily have that mentality, hey, let sleeping dogs lie, right? Let's not disturb that, right? And so, like, I feel that tension quite often. If you see sin crouching at the door, well, see if it gets a little closer before you say anything, or whatever. All to say, that's not peacemaking that Jesus has in mind here. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm saying, there's all these models that we have of peacemaking, and it's not what Jesus has in mind. Jesus is not talking about peaceful people or peaceable people. He's talking about people who recognize who see out there is this lack of peace. There's this lack of shalom, right? Not even the peace as we describe it, but that Hebrew word shalom. That there is this fraying of things that were meant to be together. And a peacemaker is one who doesn't say, I'm out, but moves towards it. Not in the sense of dominance and authority to try to wield this for my own benefit, but moves towards it in the manner of Christ. In an effort to restore what has been frayed, what has been broken, to restore peace between a creator and his people, restore peace between people and people where it's broken. A peacemaker is one who moves into that chaos at great risk to themselves. Right? They move into that chaos knowing that chaos might elevate their own stress levels and blood pressure. They move into that chaos knowing that perhaps they're going to choose this middle ground or something that is not going to be popular on either side. And they risk an alienation on both sides. Right? Didn't Jesus experience this as well too? Right? To be a peacemaker, especially, in our divided, tribalized society, means a willingness to move outside the security of our own little tribe, to move towards other tribes. And as you're out there in the in-between, right, you don't know like how that's going to go. Like I think of, a teenage girl who, Christian, follower of Jesus, goes to the public schools, and chooses to befriend somebody, from the transgender community, right? A transgender individual. Maybe because, she sees that, if this person could use a friend. Or maybe because they see that this person is not enjoying the peace that they have with their creator for whatever reason. Or maybe they see, there's this tension between the transgender community and the Christian community because they both think they're out to get one another. Right? And so this teenager decides, I'm going to move towards that individual and to befriend that person. And as I do that, I'm going to move towards them, and as any friendship is, I'm going to try to understand what are the dynamics behind their life and why they choose the life that they choose, and right? And maybe as you are slow to speak and quick to listen, you develop an empathy. And you develop a sympathy. It must be really hard to struggle through life with this distorted sense of identity or no sense of belonging or whatever. So, you develop a sympathy. That must be painful. And maybe you decide to speak of the truth, the hope, the life, and the joy that you have found. Right? And immediately now, that Christian teen is in a vulnerable place. Because you don't know how that friend is going to respond. Because, in today's day and age, we don't respond well to people who would dare to speak something contrary to something so fundamental to my life. So maybe that friend will reject me. Meanwhile, I've got voices coming from my Christian tribe saying, ooh, you are flirting dangerous lines of affirming in your befriending of others, right? And so, they have to deal with the sideward glance of judgment that comes on occasion. Like, I'm watching you very carefully, right? That's what a peacemaker does. It moves beyond the security of the tribe to move towards those where there's that tension and that conflict, and often is a very unpopular place. I don't know. It's in the political liberal who decides, or who can also say, you know what? These conservatives, they're onto something in certain issues. And actually, they might be right about that, and we're dead wrong about this issue. Or the conservative who recognizes this. It's like, you can't do that in today's day. It's an all or nothing game. Like, if you're in this tribe, it's all or nothing. You don't give an inch to the other side because that's to, risk something or the other. Like, you just don't do that. Right? A peacemaker is the one who seeks understanding, who tries to know like where the other side is coming from and is willing to throw a bone where a bone should be thrown. Or, man, great examples of peacemakers today come out of the persecuted church. Like if you would listen to the stories, if you're all tuned into voices from the church where there's persecution, Spirit-filled church that's found joy and freedom in Christ and is trying to live in pursuit of Jesus and is suffering persecution as a result of it. You know one thing that you very rarely ever hear coming from those situations? You very rarely hear the word retaliation. Hardly ever. Instead, you hear words of forgiveness, sacrificial love. Right? Here are people who are recognizing, man, there is this torn relationship through largely no fault of their own. And yet a peacemaker says, I don't retaliate. And a peacemaker says, man, I swallow the massive debt that has been taken from me to be able to show to this person the love of Christ and maybe bring some restoration, reconciliation. I hear this a lot these days, if you tune it at all, to the voices coming from the church in the Middle East, like the church in Israel and in the Palestinian territories, right? You have, our Jewish brothers and sisters in the Christian church who have suffered hatred, ethnic tension, in a variety of different ways. And they feel that. And yet they're pleading with the powers that be to stop the madness of peace via death and violence. Or you hear it from our Palestinian brothers and sisters in the church. Man, I was just reading Faris Abraham. He's the founder of Levant Ministries, which goes all throughout the Arab world, trying to share Christ with Muslim teenage boys, guys. And he's a Palestinian. I think he grew up in the West Bank. And, there was a point in time where you could see that there was some day where there was all this tension that was brewing on their street. And there was violence that was breaking out between Israeli and Palestinian on their street. And so their mom got them out of the house. They were going to take them to get somewhere else. And boom, mom shot dead by an Israeli gunman right in front of their house when there is a child. The father was committed to nonviolence, also committed to no taxation without representation. And as a result of that, was hauled off and spent most of his life in prison, and they lost their home and all of their possessions. His best friend, 14 years old, was shot dead by an Israeli settler, right? But yet, when you listen to Faris Abraham, as he's going around, as he's sharing Jesus with these Muslim boys all throughout the Arab world, what's most powerful about him is not just his words, but his testimony. And his constant, deliberate, prayerful pursuit of forgiveness and sacrificial love towards those who have taken so much, everything that he holds as so sacred in life. Right? This is what a peacemaker is. Sees where there is conflict and moves towards it at great risk in the name of Christ. And oftentimes suffers for it. And maybe this is where we can connect it to these last two Beatitudes. Blessed are you when you suffer for righteousness' sake, for yours is the kingdom. Or blessed are you when you suffer on account of me, says Jesus, for your reward is great. Right, and again, it's not... just understand what he's saying there. He's not saying that, well, as you bless this, well, I see that and I will reward you with the promotion or whatever. He's saying, no, that as you pursue the pathway of making peace and as you suffer persecution for it in my name, in the name of the kingdom, like you are blessed because you are living my way of life. You are living under the reign of me as the good and gracious and peacemaking and benevolent king. You are living now what it looks like to live as a citizen of the kingdom. And this is the kingdom that is going to win out. And so one day, all things truly will be yours. almost like a badge of pride, I would think. Like, right, where's our Bickle Piasecki people down in Texas during that Eagles-Cowboys game? And even in Dallas, I think it's for Fort Worth, or I don't know. But if I was down there, I would want to walk around in an Eagles jersey and receive persecution as a badge of honor. Yeah, because this is what it means to be an Eagle, right? So that's in a much way different. But that's sort of the idea. Blessed are you when you're persecuted in my name. Because what that means is that you're being, isn't this exactly what he says? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called what? Sons of God. Which is a loaded term, but at its root level, it means part of the family. And you bear the family resemblance. Or in other words, you are like God. Right? And is there any greater blessedness that somehow we would be brought out of the depths of broken humanity to participate in Godness? That's how the ancient church would often describe the gospel. Jesus participated in humanness so that we might participate in his divinity. Like, this is a wonderful thing. Right? And so in all of this, man, it's just oozing with the gospel. Right? Blessed are you because you're participating with me, who is like this. You participating with this Christ, who, as Paul writes to the church in Colossae, in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace. How? By the blood of the cross, sacrificially. For in him, when he writes to the church in Ephesus, he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and broken down in his own flesh that dividing wall of hostility. He came, he preached peace to you who were far off, and peace to you who were near. You who were once alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. And Paul's talking about this all the time when he writes to the church in Corinth. He says how God has not counted men's transgressions against them, but has reconciled to himself, and then has committed to us the ministry of what? Reconciliation. Right? Or James, who you imagine was sitting there on the mount along the Sea of Galilee. Right? He writes, wisdom that is from above is first pure and then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who not just live peaceful lives, not just who avoid peace, but who make peace, he says. Right? So, hopefully we have identified what genuine peacemaking isn't. Get a clear sense of what it is. You see where there is this torn shalom, and you move at it, potentially at risk to yourself. If you are in any way a participant in that, man, you are quick to seek forgiveness. You are quick to give forgiveness. And if you see it out there, a peacemaker moves into it, potentially at risk to themselves, in order to restore broken relationships, one with another, and in order to restore broken relationships, one with their Creator. And maybe as we close it, let me just do this, because we've talked about peacemaking on the grand scale, and big things, historical things, or whatever. I read a good article by Tish Harrison Warren. She's an Anglican writer, priest. And she writes some stuff that I found very helpful. She says, look, if you want to just really make this practical, she says, keep it local and keep it small. Or start there. I'll read this quote and then we'll close it with this. She says, we're facing huge problems as a culture. Stories of violence and war blare from the headlines. Human life, whether that of an embryo, a refugee, a Jewish or Palestinian child, or an immigrant, is devalued and left unprotected. It feels like we're all exhausted by the past decade and the noise, chaos, polarization, and the vitriol is brought, right? She says the first social task of the church is to be the church. It's to offer an alternative community formed by Jesus that embodies a very different sort of kingdom. That's everything we're talking about. It says we have to take up the slow work of repair, of reforming our witness to the light of Christ amid darkness. And then she says this work will be frustratingly small and local, under the radar, away from the headlines. It will feel paltry and unimportant in the face of the raging nations and the widespread ecclesial and national decay. It will be long, risky, and uncertain. Uncertain in the sense that you don't know what's going to come back. Not uncertain in the sense that it is the pathway of blessedness, right? So I think that's the powerful question. How can you on a small local level be someone who sees the brokenness and moves towards a peace? How can you make sure that in a congregation, man, where we have all sorts of different perspectives and passions, stuff that we talked about last week, man, that you are one who is always striving to make peace so that we can hold a wonderful example to a world that doesn't know how to do that, right? How can I weep with those who weep on the heels of the election? Or rejoice with those who rejoice on the heels of the election? Or as Dick was telling me, be anxious with those who are anxious on the heels of the election, right? How can I do that? How can I be slow to speak and quick to listen, to seek understanding, try to be empathetic, move in sympathy, so that I can be someone who makes and restores peace, so that together we can shine that light of this alternate kingdom to a world that's drowning in whatever knockoff kingdoms they're chasing after. Is there a relationship in your home, in your extended family, where there is that lack of shalom? Maybe it involves you. And even if your sin was tiny in response to the sin that was much greater coming at you, is there forgiveness that needs to be offered or forgiveness that needs to be sought? Do you see a relationship at work where there's just all this tense and stress because there's a lack of peace? And is there a way that maybe you could move towards that? At risk to yourself, seeking to be an agent of reconciliation, one with other, and maybe, by God's grace, a reconciliation between them and their Creator. That's the goal in all these things, right? So we're going to close it with that. And I'll just say, maybe as you do that, maybe you will find what Jesus says to be true. That as you pursue the pathway of making peace, you will find that that is the blessed life. Because that is the life of those who look like God. And to those who belong to the kingdom. And to those whose reward is great. So may God lead us in that for his glory, for our good, and for the sake of those who desperately need his peace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.